soonest. All right, so we should be, and remember we would be streaming live on the NDP Facebook page and also on our YouTube channel, and you can have all those presentations. And the beauty of it, if you missed the presentations from yesterday, you can also get them, go back onto the streams and get them. All right, so we're gonna try and get the major in, just waiting on that crew to get him in. Let's see. All right, get him in soonest. So I think we have the major. Let's see if we have that connection. Good morning, to Major the Honorable Sinclair Leacock. Am I hearing you loud and? Are you hearing me loud and clear?
Hearing you loud and clear, Major, from here on out.
Okay, all right. Let me just.
Morning.
All right. So, welcome to the program. It's really a pleasure on a Wednesday to have you here with us. I know you're not in this particular studio, so I won't have the benefits of a wet throat, but that's all right.
You can say you miss me, but that's allowed. You can say you miss me.
That would not be keeping with the script. It's great to have you. It's great
Morning.
to have you. All right, Major. So, Major, it's all over to you. And the New Democratic Party has been making these presentations. We know that the governing party has failed to deliver to the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and as a result, we are where we are. So it's over to you, Major.
Well, thanks very much, Bert. And let me say to our listening public, this conversation that I'm having here this morning to all of you in the diaspora here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and of course the wonderful people of Kingstown, Central Kingstown. Maybe let me be generous, Kingstown, East, West, and Central. And I never leave out my VP friend in South Leeward, because we try for having the most wonderful people in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I was making the point that this is not going to follow the typical budget presentation style, nor do I see what I'm saying this morning to be a budget presentation. But I'm going to address fundamentally some key issues that arose out of this year's budget presentation that needs more detailed discussion and conversation over and beyond what a budget presentation would allow. So I'm asking you to be patient with me as I go through that very important exercise. But before I do that, I also have to, as a preliminary, say how much I appreciated the contributions of my colleagues that went before me, Daniel and Israel yesterday, and of course Lavon out of East St. George. But I also want to commend MP Cummings and Bruce for the remarkable and wonderful representation that they gave to us in that parliamentary exercise when the budget was unfortunately abandoned and the government misbehaved so badly in the People's House. And I was particularly pleased to see that others who I believe have fair credibility, and I include here one, Jomo Thomas, because I listened to the program here on Voices, was in high praise and respect for the way both Senator Bruce and MP Cummings represented the case in that exercise, because government really abdicated their responsibility when they unceremoniously closed the debate and wound it up. And I think starting with the Speaker, certainly the Prime Minister himself, the Minister of Finance, and all others who in one way or the other contributed to that disaster, really ought to be hanging their hats in shame. So I wanted to reinforce that, and it's something we should go over and over again, because it's a very serious violation of responsibility to the nation, and does conform in more ways than one that St. Vincent and the Grenadines is today not a real place. That said, Bert, I had spoken to you earlier, and I hope you have it keyed up there. I want to go back to the budget, the appropriation bills debate on a presentation or the introductory remarks from the Deputy Prime Minister of the Grenadines, Montgomery Daniel, who referenced my statement or my presentation in the estimates portion of this exercise. And if you have that keyed up, I would allow you to come into there now, and then I'll take off from there.
Okay, I'll give you that. Now, let me apologize. The audio a little low, but we'll try and work with that.
I have listened to the debate by the member for Central Kingstown on the 19th of December and would have made prior comments on this matter, where, and of course the leader of the opposition, where he has indicated that the NDP government will spend $50 million within the agriculture sector to pulp soft fruits for farmers to benefit. Madam Speaker, I joined the Ministry of Agriculture in 1975 as a young extension officer. And there are others who joined before me. There are people like Clive Bishop, Glenroy Brown, who may be still alive. There's a Gonsalves, there's a Davis in Morocco. All these are guys who were there before me. And there are those who came after me. And all of us, our interest has been to increase the overall profits at the farm level. And that we would have had tremendous work with AICA, with CARI, with FAO, in relation to pulping of soft fruits, and to see how we can have other initiatives within the Ministry of Agriculture. Madam Speaker, as it was identified for pulping of fruits, there is quite a technical difficulty, as identified by the technical people, in pulping of soft fruits. I'm not saying it can't be done, it can be done. And I want it to be done because part of my life has always been farming. And I represent a farming community. And so, even let's say you're pulping mangoes, because of the different texture, there are different chemical treatments, different sieve sizes. These are things that are required, which are very expensive. It's like, Madam Speaker, for the treatment of patients as they have kidney problems, and you go to the health center, that each patient has to change to different medical appliances to ensure that they have the maximum treatment. The same thing applies if you are pulping fruits. And so, Madam Speaker, I support very much the initiative, and much more than that. But $50 million in the agriculture sector, particularly at this time, if you really, you're serious, $50 million will not do it. Madam Speaker, we have tried in the Ministry of Agriculture. And even when the banana industry was being wound down, WIPDECO, which became Windfresh, with the support of the government, we were able to buy 2 units. Well, Windfresh was able to buy 2 units. One in St. Lucia, one in Grenada. They were closed after they were involved in the processing of sour fruits. The owners could not go with the expenses incurred in this exercise. But Madam Speaker, Windfresh sought to divest its portfolio from bananas into other crops. And Windfresh injected about $60 million. They capitalized about $60 million to ensure that you can get involved in this activity.
Thank you very much, Bud. Thank you. That's enough.
Okay, all right, no problem.
Thanks a lot thus far. So, listeners, I want to draw your attention to the contribution of the Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, on this question of improving the value chain and involving ourselves in value-added activity in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And the observations I want to make at this stage is that on behalf of the New Democratic Party, we propose a $50 million agro-processing plant. And I'm being personal here because I identified Green Hill community in central Kingstown, where the Liberty Lodge Training Center is now located, as a proper place for such an activity. The first thing I want to do is to say that we have captured the attention of the government on this particular matter. And they cannot blow hot and cold on this issue. Because in this very budget, which has just been approved, they have identified 2 agro-processing investments, one in the Leeward and one in the country, to do precisely what I have been speaking about. And they did so in an attempt, as we would say in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, to run race against our idea. So I think it's important for us to understand that if we are going to speak about people-centered development, that an investment of this nature, which I estimate can provide an income source for over 10,000 Vincentians at different levels, truly represents a bottom-up approach towards economic development. That's what I want to establish. It's a bottom-up approach. More people at the bottom of the economic ladder would realize an opportunity to provide an income for themselves. Yes, we have not spelled it out, and I will not do so today in this program, but I want to give you an assurance that it's an area of study in which I've been involved for the last 40 years. Internationally, at the level of the university, various research agencies, and continued and ongoing research work. And that is something that the New Democratic Party will deliver. But I want to make the point that such an investment is important not just from the point of view and the perspective of a bottom-up approach and providing income and opportunity for a large pool of Vincentians, but it is critical for us to continue to feed the contributions of the National Insurance Scheme. And short of those kinds of numbers, we can still have problems in our social security services. I will not belabor the point. Sufficient for me to say that coming out of the appropriation debate, we now have on record that the government, through the Deputy Prime Minister, has no objection to the proposal. Let me, however, make this clarification. We have not confined and or limited ourselves to juicing from the soft fruits. We said it's an processing plants to do any and every kind of processing that's possible. Whether it is pulping, whether it is juicing, whether it is doing nectars, whether it is dicing, whether it is drying, whether it is going into other derivatives of as a contributor to other food products, we are in business. And it's important for us to move our agriculture sector to its current state of a mere 5% contribution to GDP to a much more significant contributor to the economy. So I wanted to make that presentation this morning, specifically on that major capital program, and to compare it and to contrast it to what the government is prepared to do in the area of tourism. Again, where we have no problems, but to the extent that they are prepared to take $90 million of Social Security monies and put it into tourism, and then take that plan by their own explanation and franchise it out to a management company. Look at the number of people who will benefit in that regard. And I would also go forward to say that in the tourism sector, what we see by and large is a top-down economic approach. The assumption that because we build a plant and we hire professional management, that the money will trickle down to the people at the bottom of the totem pole. That's a debate for which we must remain engaged. But I also ask you to play me a second extract from the appropriation bill, which complements this one, and it's the statement by the Minister of Agriculture, Sabuto Caesar. But I have that now.
Yeah, I'm going to give you that. This is a little lower, just up to let listeners know in advance. So let's try and get this one.
Madam Speaker, never in the history of agriculture in our region that any island has ever done a commodity alone and enter into major source markets. If you take it from the time with sugar, you had the British West India Company that aggregated the sugar so that you had economies of scales. If you take the commodity bananas, if it wasn't for Wibdeco to aggregate the bananas from Dominica, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Lucia and Grenada, you would not be able to get the volumes to bring the geese line. And it is with this same type of appreciation and thinking that even though in the Windward Islands we now have a diversified production platform, the FAO has sponsored a $500,000 project called the Windward Island Food Production Corridor Project, so that as we diversify together, we must also be able to aggregate together.
Again, Bert, I want to thank you for that. And again, to our viewers and our listeners, I want to highlight the importance of that declaration and that statement by the Minister of Agriculture. Because what he said is truthful. What he said is correct. But we have to go beyond the truth and the veracity of the statement. Practical budgetary activity for the benefit of Vincentians. Now, in the previous Parliament exercise, I asked the question whether we in St. Vincent and the Grenadines at this point in time had any single commodity for which we could fill a 20-foot, much more so a 40-foot container on a weekly basis to export produce, manufactured, value-added, or otherwise, from St. Vincent and the Grenadines to any source market. And the answer is no. Now, this is 2024, and there isn't a single product currently being produced and manufactured in St. Vincent and the Grenadines that can fill a 20-foot container for export activity. Now you flag that. Flag that. We are currently investing in a $600 million port. Well, we cannot guarantee we can export a 20-foot container per week. So what is the $600 million port to do? It is what my colleague Fitz Bramble, the president of the Democratic Party, and other colleagues, and indeed the party in the whole, has been guarding and warning against. If the port, $600 million, is solely for the purpose of facilitating imports, the retail trade sector in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, it will simply have the unintended consequence of making worse the current balance of trade position. That is, we are simply in a stage in which more is being imported in St. Vincent and less is being exported. The foreign exchange implications are clear. So that has to be addressed. That's the first argument I want to raise. The second is, if the Minister of Agriculture and the government understands and appreciates the fact that we do not now have the capacity as an island state, St. Vincent and the Grenadines or the sister islands by themselves, to full a geese boat or any other shipping lines, then it is clear that when the annual budget and or appropriation bill, to use the bigger word, is being prepared for St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Grenada, St. Lucia, Dominica, that there must be a more deliberate attempt for a joint budgetary activity, particularly in our agriculture and light manufacturing sectors, to see what, as a unit, a collective unit, using the banana windbag experience, we can in fact have the quantities on an ongoing basis for export for the development of our countries. Now that's not a light matter. It's not a light matter because the Eastern Caribbean dollar depends on our earnings of hard currencies, whether it is pound sterling, euros, or US dollar. And that dynamic is important because currently in our trade balances here, even with our best efforts, and I draw to your attention a case in point, we have the East Caribbean Group that exports flour to the region. What did they do? They sell flour around the region and they earn soft currencies, EC dollars, or Bajan dollars, or Trinidad dollars, or other Caribbean currency dollars. But how do they pay for the wheat that goes into the flour? They have to depend on our tourism sector or export sector of some kind, earning hard currency, US pounds or euros. So all those are important in the equation. And I'm saying this to make the point that it's easy for us to stand up and debate and debate and debate and talk. It brings us back to the fundamentals, that there is an inherent weakness in our economy, a structural deficiency, if I may use the more academic and intellectual term. That is, we are not well constructed. Our foundations are insecure. And an important aspect of our economic debate and conversation must be how we restructure, reorganize, and redevelop our St. Vincent and the Grenadines. As it stands now, coming out of the debate exercise, there is too little that speaks to a restructuring, a reorganizing, and a remodeling of our St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And I use the example, which I will find time later in this presentation to address. We are like the proverbial motor vehicle stuck on a soft surface, indeed mud. And the more we attempt to rev that vehicle, from those of us who have driving experience, the deeper into the mud the vehicle goes. Until at last we realize that to get out of that, we must physically lift the vehicle out of a soft surface and onto a firm platform from which it can drive away. That analogy is relevant to our St. Vincent and the Grenadines today, that we need to see more of that done. What do I mean that we go deep and deep into the mud? I mean, and I will give an example of that to you here now. It means we go into more and more debt. Let me bring to the Vincentian and the wider listenership, what is our history in St. Vincent and Grenadines? Well, we say we are borrowing and borrowing, as the Prime Minister likes to speak about, with this foot in the gale. In 2004, we needed $51.9 million to service debt. And I'm going to go through to where we are now in 2024. In 2005, that rose to $64 million. In 2006, it was $94 million. In 2007, it's $102 million. In 2008, it's 107.4. In 2009, it's $122 million. In 2010, it's $136 million. In 11, 121. In 112, it still remained at 121. In 2013, it was $137 million. In 2014, it's $140 million. In 2015, it's 143. 2016 is 161 million. 2017, 179 million. 2018 is 199.6, call that 200,000. In 2019, a huge jump, $229 million. 220 the year after, 222. In the year 2021, it's 250.8, call that $251 million. In 2022, it's just $257 million. And I think this year, 2024, we are up to, I think, about $280 million. In other words, look at our progression from $51 million to approaching $300 million. Let's give that practical translation. Where does the government get money to service our debt? It gets the money from taxes. In literal terms, it means they're forcing the hands further and further down into your pocket, your bosom, your wallet, your briefcase, or wherever you keep monies to keep the ship of state afloat. And the budget therefore has to answer the question, how much more debt can St. Vincent afford? What plans are there afoot to remove this debt burden that's a yoke around the neck of the average Vincentian? Have we seen or heard anything presented in the budget that speaks to a reduction of this huge rising and accumulating debt burden that is making life harder and harder for Vincentians? Another analogy, you have a house and you have to get up into it. You used to climb one step, 2, then 3, then 4, then 10. And it gets to the point that there are so many stairs to be climbed to get into your home or to your yard that it takes a toll on your knees and your back and your muscles. And one day something gives away because you simply can't carry it no more. That is the trajectory and the direction of the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I turn now to a third extract from the budget that I want again to draw attention to, Vincent, this morning. And I read from page 27 of the budget 2024 as presented by the Minister of Finance. And I'm going to read 3 paragraphs, 1, 2, and 3 of page 27. This is what the Minister of Finance had to say. The private sector is an indispensable partner in the development journey of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And I want this sector to listen to this, Our Chamber of Industry and Commerce, our Employers Federation, our Farmers Union, and the various economic units that we have. The private sector is an indispensable partner in the development of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Indispensable meaning we can't do without it. He said our strong post-COVID, post-eruption recovery would not have been possible without investment and innovation from the local, regional, and international private sector. Some of the largest recent capital investments in the country have come from the private sector. Well, we know what they mean. They're speaking about Sandals investment, Rainforest, etc., and maybe the Myers and the Reno, but there's not a hell of a lot more that we can speak about. And he went on to say, the strongest job growth in recent years can be casually connected to a major private sector investment. Again, reference Sandals. I go on to the second paragraph. So these are the things that we have to wrap our hands around to understand where we are as a country. He says, at the same time, in small open economies like ours, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, listen to this, development cannot be outsourced to relatively small local companies or rapacious global conglomerates. So on the one hand, he dismisses the business sector in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the small and unable to make any meaningful contribution. And when it comes from outside, he's guarding us against what he describes as rapacious global conglomerates. Now, for convenience, that doesn't include the Sandals of the world, because it really doesn't rise to that standard. So I leave him out of this conversation. Let's continue, because you have to begin to understand the thinking and the philosophy of the Unity Labour Party, where borders are concerned. A progressive government has many, yes, a progressive government, and I have it to bend my book at the readings properly. A progressive government has many roles to play. That's true. As a visionary pursuer of catalytic investment, as an enthusiastic enabler of competition, as the facilitator of an enabling business environment, a lot of words, and as an active regulator and vigilant watchdog to safeguard social and environmental standards, reduce inequality, and strengthen social protection. To truly accelerate development, the state must also be entrepreneurial. We have no problem with that. And enterprising. But are they? That's the question. Where the enterprise of the state in its economic leadership, partnership, and participation? It gets more intriguing. Paragraph 3. Our government, the Unity Labour Party government, is under no illusion that it is the only, I want to repeat that, the Unity Labour Party, I place that for government, is the only seat of innovation, investment, and initiative in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I want Vincent to digest that. The Ralph Everett Gonsalves, Carmelo Gonsalves administration is saying that they, the Unity Labour Party, is the only seat of innovation, investment, and initiative in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. In other words, you, the private sector, and the rest of us really don't matter or matter that much. It continues. However, we are equally convinced that our small economies and underdeveloped private sectors, this is the Unity Labour Party after 23 years, an underdeveloped private sector benefits from our active participation far more than they do our laissez-faire neglect. He said in Vietnam and elsewhere in the Caribbean, The state, I want to repeat that again. The state
Major, you and me? Major? Major, you dropped out for a while there, so if you could just pause while we get that the audio fix.
Okay. So, so we're having a little audio problem, and I am pausing to hope that both can have that resolved. So I'll be back in on the presentation. And therefore, I'm awaiting both signal that all is well and that I can proceed.
Okay.
Go ahead now.
Okay, let me just apologize for that. We're just having issues that we're gonna fix in a moment.
Is it an internet problem or it's the connectivity problem?
I'm hearing you now.
Okay. So
Major, if you could just backtrack for a minute or two from just before
the government.
Yes.
Well, I read the conclusion position of the government, of the Minister of Finance, in which he said, our government, the Unity Labour Party government, is under no illusion that it is the only seat of innovation, investment in St. Vincent and Grenadines. That's the conclusion, that's the takeaway. The Unity Labour Party perceives themselves as the only seat of innovation, investment in St. Vincent and Grenadines. So the graves of the world with investment in the rum factory, the various of the world, the East Caribbean flour mills, the East Caribbean metals, and several other entrepreneurs that we have that are taking initiatives of all kinds in St. Vincent and Grenadines, they have little ability for innovation, little for investment in our St. Vincent and Grenadines. And we, as a people, are being invited to surrender our creativity, intuition, innovation to the Unity Labour Party and see to them that title as being the only one, just as only they can run St. Vincent and Grenadines. Only the Gonzalez regime, only Ralph can be Prime Minister. No one else matters. St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We have to digest that and come to grips with that realization. Now, while they're beating their chest with that statement, I'm not going to go in much detail at this time, but I will return to it because I know my colleague Fitzgerald is going to deal significantly with a document that we have before us. This is a document referred to as the Fiscal Responsibility Mechanism of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And it's a document that the government asked a group of professionals to prepare to guide them into the development path for St. Vincent and the Grenadines, of financing, our debt portfolios, our growth activities, etc., etc. On page 6 of that report, the advisors to the government said this: the country urgently, we read that again, the country urgently needs a concerted effort to attract private investment to expedite major projects and stimulate economic growth, to support and advance the innovative and worthy efforts being undertaken by the state. I will have a conversation here at some stage because, and maybe for the first time, I'm raising debate with my past student, now senior administrator at the University of the West Indies, Dr. Justin Robinson, that he has to be more open-minded and fair-handed in the politics of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the advice to the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Because he knows, as he has advised in this report, that debt and unserviceable debt is run away with St. Vincent. And to use the very language of the Minister of Finance, nothing now go on. So I repeat that. The country urgently needs a concerted effort to attract additional private investment to expedite major projects. Now, what does that mean? The government this year has $815 million worth of taxes and non-tax revenue to run St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and a recurrent expenditure of $835 million to run our St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It is short by $25 million or thereabout on the recurrent side. Dr. Friday has spent time and time again on that matter, and other colleagues have done the same. But the government, in their continued dishonesty and absence of credibility, goes on to the capital side of the program to impress upon us. And Dr. Robinson, you must have access to this information, that for this year, we need $570 million to do our capital projects. 570. But what do they say to you, Dr. Roberts? They said that they have raised 805. And you know, of the 805 that they're claiming that they have for capital programs, 215 is worthless. 215. And the last best effort of the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines to raise money on the other capital receipts, as reported by the Director of Audit in the 2019 report, was that when they said they would raise $198 million, they only raised $3 million. The facts are that over the last 8 years or so, the government has been short of the money that they require to run this country by over $800 million. And they say we must not add it up. But they have been consistently falling short. So the question still remains, as you have advised, where is the funds going to come from for this concerted effort to attract additional private investment? Why are we, and how long can we ignore the $600 million or thereabout that can be raised in the market in the St. Kitts Nevis and the CBI? Last evening, I listened that St. Vincent and the Grenadines and St. Kitts Nevis had the same international ranking for the quality of our passports. And St. Kitts and Nevis has been in the Citizens by Investment Program for over 30 years and has not diminished the quality of the passports. Do we see Kittitians? Do we see Dominicans? Do we see Grenadians? Do we see St. Lucians? Do we see Antiguans on the street of St. Vincent and the Grenadines in search of jobs and opportunities? No. But you go to Antigua and you go to St. Kitts, and it's a what with Vincentians in search of a brighter future and for career job opportunities. I make that impassioned plea because it is clear that the only way out of this dilemma that St. Vincent finds itself in today for finding money to run the country would be their continued dependence upon tax receipts and or hook in our guilt. Debt, and more debt. with an assumption or hope that one day we will get further debt relief. We cannot continue to produce this kind of administration. We do so at our own risk. So I highlight those issues thus far for attention. I turn now to a matter in which we still have to be guarded and careful. And I go to the actual report of the National Insurance Scheme, because the Minister of Finance would have us believe that the 5% increase over the next 3 years in contributions from employers and employees will give us life for another 30 years beyond the doomsday that was already established for 2033, 2034. The report of the National Insurance Service says contributions and investments income are closely linked to economic performance and labor market. That's the first line of the statement. Contributions and investment income are closely linked to economic performance and labor market. What did the government advisors just advise? They advise that the country urgently needs a concerted effort to attract additional private investments. So, if I was at the NIS and I was a manager, I'd be worried. But they go on to say, real economic growth, while positive in each of the last 3 years in the review period, had an annual growth rate of between 1.2%. But they went on to say that average annual inflation during the review period was 1.8%. In other words, the cost of living is rising faster than is the growth in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So let's have a fair question for the over 80% of St. Vincent and the Grenadines that depends on National Insurance Scheme money at this time. As inflation continues to rise, as cost of living continues to rise, when is the last occasion that we gave an increase to our pensioners who have no income and depend solely on the pension contributions? And the answer is not for a long time. So literally speaking, they remain sitting ducks, depending upon the mercies of the children and the children, a large part in the diaspora community, and a little less so in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, as the majority of Vincentians have to fend for themselves. While the proposals on the record will bring about some ease in the circumstances, I have, as recent as yesterday, been in conversation with experts in Social Security, and they advise me that there are still major areas to be attended to as a consequence of the last report and proposal of the government. In the areas of whether we go to retirement benefits, age pensions, and so on and so forth, whether that will be sufficient. And I know that further conversations will take place with experts out of our central banks. I put the S on banks so that I'm not pointing fingers. But I say that to make the point that the New Democratic Party still has work to do before it can give an all clear on the NIS proposals that are now before us. But for the time being, we are proceeding in accepting of the 1+1% increase of NIS contributions this year. But it goes beyond doubt to show that they are essentially this year going to give in the left hand and take away in the right hand. in terms of the increases that are going to give to salaries and wages in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So we are still in a difficult situation in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and there is still much work to be done to improve the lot and life of the average Vincentian at this time. I want to return now to, in a sense, an earlier part of the conversation today when I said that the budget debate was abruptly terminated when the Speaker of the House failed to exercise good husbandry to manage the affairs of the House, in which he could have called for a suspension and asked both sides of the House to re-examine the position of continuing debate. And again, I have to applaud my colleague Daniel Cummings, because he did stand and in very firm and passionate language indicate that we need to have the debate continue. I raise all that to make the point that the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines happens at this time to be the Minister of National Security. And the largest problem that loomed in St. Vincent and the Grenadines over 2023 was the rising and escalation in crime and violence in the street of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. That people could no longer feel safe in public places and public spaces. I think I have already presented that at the moment we cannot continue a business as usual approach with respect to national security. And it should be manifestly clear that the crime and the violence on the streets of St. Vincent are not now just a matter of resource allocation, whether the police has enough or whether they have too much. What we can say is that it remains a challenge to our budgetary proposals in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, that allocated to national security is almost twice as much as that which is allocated to any of the dominant engines of the economy. Certainly, the expenditure for policing, which we understand and appreciate has to be substantial, is far greater than that to the development of agriculture. It is far greater than that which is dedicated to tourism. And how does an economy get itself out of a stuck position? Well, common sense would tell me and should tell us, and in so it informs the New Democratic Party, that we have to do two things. One, production. We must produce and produce more and more and more and more. And we must simultaneously do more with less. In academic language, we must raise our levels of productivity. There's no evidence, absolutely none, in this exercise that we are doing that. And therefore, one can really anticipate that the situation, the environment, the circumstances, the ecosystem that facilitates a rising in crime and violence will continue to proceed apace. I've said it before, and I'm saying it again. I know of people who have been eyewitness to criminal activities in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and have sought to get assistance by having themselves placed in the witness protection program. And when authoritative sources have been reached to lend that assistance, the local authorities said, no way, Jose, leave them to death. That's no way to run a country. It's no way to run a country. And I highlight that because the investment climate in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is directly impacted by the quality of security and citizen safety that is provided. And there's a clear abdication of national security responsibilities by the Prime Minister of National Security to the people of St. Vincent and Grenadines. And I do not think at this stage any amount of apologies will suffice for his dereliction of duties as the Honorable Leader of the Opposition has titled it. We in the New Democratic Party have a very clear-eyed view as to what we must do with respect to crime and violence and to regain St. Vincent and the Grenadines from those who must feel that they must be in control of this life of destruction of essential values. And we give this assurance here and now that we will detail much more of this at the special exercise that will be set up for that purpose. So, ladies and gentlemen, I've shared those with you today. I may well return on a subsequent occasion to address the budget as you more are accustomed to in parliamentary format. But I thought it was important enough to highlight those factors for a national conversation so that you can get a better appreciation of the considerations that should go into a budgetary debate that has been so poorly represented this year by the existing regime. Obviously and clearly, it is time, and time long overdue, for us to rid ourselves of the Unity Labour Party and hand over the realm governance of this country to Dr. Friday and the rest of us in the New Democratic Party. I thank you for hearing me out, and I'll be open and available to means that we will establish today for further discussions. Whether we'll be able to do it from this office or whether I have to go to the radio station is not clear, but either way, we certainly will have those conversations, and I take advice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Major, for that presentation. It's 12:32. You're listening to, we're listening to a presentation by MP for Central Kingston, Sinclair, Major Leacock. We will take the break. We'll take the break and we'll come back. And within that time, I'll update you as to the lines and how do you get to the major. So we're going to take the break and come back. Just to let you know that the stream will go out and we'll return after the break with additional presentations.